What can we learn about the context of Jesus' life from contemporary historical accounts? Although we tend to think about Jesus' life and death as an isolated story and not really as a part of history, historical accounts of the lives of people in scriptures surrounding Jesus' life provide us with essential information to understanding our faith. Three people we're going to look at are Herod, the Magi, and Pilate. So, Herod, besides his interaction with the Magi and him killing children near Bethlehem, and also his death, there isn't really much more in the Bible about him. But we can learn from sources outside of the Bible. So Herod, who was Herod? He was the king, but he was an unlikely king because he wasn't a Jew. He was actually an Edomite who lived in Judea. He was not part of the royal family. There was actually already a royal family in Judea, and that was the line of David. So it was kind of weird that he was king. His father moved to Judea and converted and rose to governorship. His name was Antipater. And he, as a governor, was able to actually rescue Caesar by sending some troops to help him in Egypt in a time when he was fighting Pompey. So this move of Herod's father made him popular with Caesar. And so Caesar made him the chief minister of Judea. And so Antipater then made Herod the governor of Galilee. So Caesar dies. So at this point, the kind of pro-Roman politics of Antipater makes him pretty unpopular with the Jews. So that's not looking very good for him. Mark Antony is kind of in power, and he actually is friendly with Herod, and he helps him be promoted. Then Augustus rises to power afterwards, and so Herod sides with Augustus. So at that point, it's kind of, Augustus was Mark Antony's enemy, so it's a little weird that he's signing with it. And what Herod says to him, he says, quote, "You will wish to know not whose friend, but what sort of friend I have been," unquote. So what he's saying there to Augustus is like, yeah, I was real buddy with your enemy, but, I had his back kind of thing. So let's be friends. So what Herod does is he marries Aristobulus, the third. He marries his sister, and he makes him the high priest. So this is a guy who's kind of his political rival, is kind of gunning for the kingship, and he kind of puts him out of the way. Like, he marries his sister and puts him into the high priest position. There's a story that goes that he invites this guy to a meeting at his house, just to kind of talk about things. Remember, this is his political rival. And they're just kind of talking about things, and he's like, look at that pool of mine over there. Doesn't that look so fun? All the servants, kind of splashing around in there. He's like, why don't we go for a swim now? I know we're supposed to be talking, but let's go for a quick swim. So he's like, okay. And they go over, and, Aristobulus kind of jumps in the pool, swimming around. And then Herod's servants kind of come up to him and, maybe one of them dunks him. And they're kind of messing around with him. He's like, all right, guys, that's okay. That's good enough. And they actually keep dunking him and hold him under and actually end up drowning him, apparently by Herod's request. And this was Aristobulus, who was only 18 years old at the time. So later in his political career, he builds a temple, and he wants to make it very Roman friendly. So he builds kind of arches and columns, but it also makes the Jews happy because, it's a temple. So the temple had different sections. It was kind of sectioned off. It had a section for Jews, section for non-Jews, section for women, non-women. It was areas where men could sacrifice things like incense, and where priests sacrifice animals and things. There was actually a sign that said that any foreigners in the Jewish section would be killed. That's just an interesting little thing that we were able to learn. And so this huge temple was built by him, and it took about 46 years, according to the Bible. But even after this, the Jews didn't really like him. He killed a lot of people. He even ended up killing one of his own sons. He killed everyone under 2 in Bethlehem, things like this. So what we can actually learn from this context is that he was really a crazy person. And so when he was doing these things in Bethlehem around the time of Jesus' birth, this was kind of expected from him. The Jews kind of expected this from him at this point because he is crazy. So on to point 2, the Magi. Now the Magi were priests or astronomers of some sort, and they were Zoroastrians. We know a bit about them. We know, about the gifts that they brought, their interaction with Herod. But that's about all we know from the Bible. It must have been actually a very strange interaction, because they're kind of like these weird priests of another religion who come from very far away to say hi to a baby. As you can imagine, that would be awkward if they got the wrong baby, because those parents would be very creeped out. Like, well, he's not the Christ. You can leave our home now. So the word magi is actually where we get the word magic and magician. They were considered to be kind of sorcerers, and they wore these all-white outfits with like face coverings and things. One of the Crassus, if you remember, is one of Julius Caesar's kind of political opponents / allies. He went out to fight the Parthians or the Persians, where the Magi are from, and so they were familiar with a lot of the Roman things, and they were familiar with Herod particularly. And Herod was actually fighting them because many of the army of Pompey, after Pompey was defeated, just kind of wandered around and left after he had been killed, just dipped out of Rome because they knew they'd probably die. And they joined up with the Persians. And so now this combined army had attacked Israel as well, because it's just kind of nearby, and they wanted to take a piece out of Rome. And so Herod had also been fighting these people for a long time. And actually what was going on with this is they got pretty close to him. So he goes up to like this mountain to hide. And he gets surrounded. And from there he leaves and he runs away to this little place in kind of the desert. Petra. He runs away to Petra. Then there he flees to Rome to get help, and the Romans eventually drive out the Persians and the army of Pompey combined. So this happened 20 or 30 years before the Magi visited Christ, and so that makes this event really strange. So here you have these people, these, like priests, essentially these sorcerer priests, from a somewhat distant land, and they come and they had just been fighting and almost killed Herod, and they meet with Herod, and so they're asking to find a baby. The whole thing's just very strange, and Herod doesn't make it any better, and he's like, "Ooh, tell me when you find him. I want to worship him." So they were actually looking for the Sociant, which is kind of a Messiah-like figure from an old Syrian myth. Kind of similar. He was actually quite similar to Jesus in many ways. They thought he would fight demonic forces and bring eternal life. It actually says in according to Solomon of Eklat, quote, "He will go into the depths of the earth, but then will ascend to the highest heights, or to the heights with the armies, unquote. So that kind of is symbolic of Jesus' death in a way. It's very similar imagery. So they were looking for kind of a Jesus-like figure. And Iranian sources indicate that they were actually looking in the stars. And they thought that he would bring the end of time. So this is something they were looking for a while. Interestingly enough, they also visited someone else. They visited young Nero. He was, at that time, he was in an affluent family, but by no means was there any guarantee that he would be emperor. He was kind of far out of that, even though his family was somewhat affluent. But, so that was a little weird, and it gave kind of a bad taste for many Romans. They thought they were kind of sinister, maybe evil, or trying to convert him. This just made Romans uncomfortable. And they actually bring gifts that they usually bring to a god. Gold, frankincense, and myrrh are usually gifts for God. So all this goes to show that it was really, although it seems kind of normal, and often we kind of group the story with the shepherds visiting Jesus, it was really a strange happening, because unlike, the shepherds who were just nearby and they hear about what happened or whatever, the Magi, they were, like sorcerer priests from another land who had just been at war with them, and they're coming all this way to find a Messiah that they've been looking for a long time at this point. So, third point, Pontius Pilate. Pontius Pilate, he was in kind of a precarious political position for most of his life. You see him in the Bible where he kind of like interviews Jesus in his trial, and that's basically it for the most part. We have some archaeological evidence about Pontius Pilate. There's some money with him on it, some like with his face on it, and we actually have his signet rings. It's like his stamp thing. So one thing interesting, another archaeological record that we have of him, is that in Roman religion, it wasn't like religion that we think of it today as like where it's like a dedication kind of. Religion in that time was more like you go to a god when you want something and you kind of form a contract with them, where it's like if you get what you want, you'll do this or you'll do that or you'll sacrifice this to them or whatever. And so when this happened, the priest would write this down and keep records of it, so they'd know this stuff was going on, and they know who keep their promises. So Pontius Pilate actually did this, but he did this for Tiberius, who is the emperor at the time, which was a little weird because Tiberius was not only like his boss, it was also like his it was also just like this creepy guy who like lived alone on an island. So that's another piece of archaeological evidence we have about him. So Pilate meant javelin. It was kind of like a nickname. It was like someone today being named like Glock or something. And Pontius was his last name. We think that he was from a lower class family, and he kind of rose through the ranks, and he became a knight, part of the equestrian order. And he was a bit of a political outsider, and he rose peculiarly quickly through the power structures. He probably had a powerful patron. Perhaps that's what that indicates. So anyway, Tiberius, who is kind of his boss, is kind of going crazy on this island doing creepy things with children. And it's thought that the head of the Praetorian, I think it's called Praetorian Guard, which is like the secret service, like his protection. It is thought that the head of this became the acting emperor essentially. And it was Caiaphas. Oh no, I'm sorry, it was someone else. So Pilate was in a somewhat good position because he was friends with Caiaphas, the high priest. This means he was probably kind of in good with the Sadducees. But this meant he could also borrow from the temple. So during his trial, they yelled that during his trial, many of the people in the crowd yelled, quote, "If you let this man go, you are no friend of Caesar," unquote. And it's from John 19:12. So friend of Caesar was actually kind of a rank or status. And he had actually had this status. And so it doesn't just mean like you're not friends with him, but it meant like you're no upper class. But it wasn't just upper class. It was like much higher than that. It meant like, friends of Caesar is kind of a tight circle. And so Pilate was not very liked by the Jews. As seen by that, they were really trying to hurt him with that statement for a few reasons. He made a few mistakes. He brought Roman standards to Jerusalem, and these had Roman gods on them. This made the Jews angry and actually surrounded his house. And he told his guards, go out there and get their swords, get ready to kill them. And the Jews ran at them cut our throats. You won't. So that didn't go very well for him. He did the same thing. He brought Roman shields to hang in the palace. This didn't go well. They sent, the Jews actually sent a formal complaint to Tiberius, who, did nothing. Pilate made another bad move when he took money from the temple to build an aqueduct. And this was to bring water to Jerusalem from outside of it. And the Jews were really mad at this, and they started kind of rioting. So he essentially just had his soldiers disperse into the crowd, kind of disguised, and then just start clubbing people. So this guy, the head of Tiberius' guard who's in charge, I think his name was Sejanus, he was suspected by Tiberius of, kind of trying to take over, and he falls from power. And he's basically, at this point, Tiberius is Pilate's patron. And so he's kind of isolated, and that's not a good situation for Pilate right now. And so right around this time, Jesus has his trial. So Jesus is accused of plotting against Rome, and he had a special type of trial that was kind of a quick capital punishment trial. Could be conducted by a governor to very quickly kill someone. The Samaritans, another bad move that he made was the Samaritans had kind of a messianic movement, and he slaughtered them all. And he got in trouble for that. So he ended up going to trial before Tiberius, but Tiberius died before he could make it, and Caligula was emperor now. We don't really know what happened. Some think he committed suicide, some think he went to Switzerland. So although we tend to think about Jesus' life and death as an isolated story and not really as part of history, historical accounts of the lives of people in scriptures that were living in kind of Jesus' life provide us with essential information to understanding our faith. Sorry, this one's really long too.